We got some spooky stuff today. We got some creepy stuff. Creepy as hell. Oh my god. Horrors from an FBI
President
database.
Ronald Reagan has just survived an attempt on his life. An emerging virus called HIV is becoming a growing concern, and workers at a wastewater treatment plant in Richmond, Virginia have just made a grisly discovery. An employee had been walking along the settling basin.
This is going to be a scary video. So if you don't, if you clicked on the thumbnail, you probably are looking for that. But just as a disclaimer, this is a scary video.
A structure used to separate water from solid material. What he saw would appear to be the body of a young woman. The police were called and the remains were recovered. The woman was young, short and slim, and had a tattoo on her arm reading, DR. A forensic analysis revealed that she had undergone a hysterectomy at some point in her life, which might point to pregnancy complications, treatment for ovarian cancer, or even darker, routine treatment at a psychiatric hospital in 20th century America. The hysterectomy didn't have anything to do with her death, however. That came about because of a bullet wound to the head. Other than the surface level information, nothing else could be gathered to tell this young woman's story.
If you know, you know. All right, no, that's disrespectful. That's disrespectful.
So, using 1981 technology, the police made a crude clay model of her head, depicting what she might have looked like before she passed, to see if the public...
Talk about crude, yeah. Oh my God. They could have done a better job. Like, you could have, I don't know. Been a little bit more flattering.
might be able to identify her. But nobody ever came forward. With no leads and nowhere to look, the police just stopped investigating.
There's no way this
no leads and
picture turns into...
The police just stopped investigating. Life would go on.
They did her dirty. Why'd they bring everything forward so much? The cheeks forward?
Her story would never be told and justice would never be served. She would never even have a name, only ever being referred to as the Richmond Jane Doe. And unfortunately, she's not a unique case. Currently, in the United States of America, there are more than 10,000 unidentified bodies.
Damn.
The idea of just coming across a body that never gets identified has to be one of the most disturbing concepts I can think of. In fiction, there's a common trope of an angry spirit haunting a place desperately trying to get somebody to tell their story. And these movies and books usually end with a tragic tale of their death finally being told, putting the ghosts at peace and allowing them to move on. Horror usually ends up being scarier than reality in most cases, but in this particular realm, reality is much darker than fiction. In real life, the body and the person that occupied it just stays lost forever. Their only memorials are scattered disconnected case files in different law enforcement agencies. In some cases, loved ones are desperately trying to get answers, unaware that the person they're searching for has already been found. But even darker than that, a lot of these people go unidentified because they've just been forgotten about, and the world callously moves on without them. When the Richmond Jane Doe briefly held the attention of law enforcement agencies in the early 1980s, criminal investigations mainly relied on traditional
murder cases from the 1970s, pre-phones, pre-internet. That's the scariest stuff right there. Murder cases before phones are so scary because nobody's gonna know where you are. Nobody can geo-track. Maybe you told somebody where you were going, but for the most part, how do you know where these people went? There's no way you're finding these people. I don't know. Talk to this guy at the gas station. Oh, I think I saw this lady going that way with that guy who looked sort of like this. Obviously don't have a picture of him, but his hair was kind of straight, about yay long. There's no way you're gonna find that person. It's so creepy to me. Much more creepy than somebody going missing today with all the CCTV and then everybody's phones and geolocation. I feel like it's just way more probable that you're going to get found today if you go missing.
Evidence, like eyewitness accounts, fingerprints, and ballistics analysis, but a new movement had been gaining momentum. Instead of just looking for measurable evidence in individual cases, criminal profiling had police identifying characteristics of crimes that could point to the perpetrator's psychology in some way. This had law enforcement investigating previously overlooked aspects of crimes, like the degree of control used by the offender, the escalation of emotion in the act, and how organized or messy the crime scene was. Identifying these characteristics allowed police to not just categorize the sort of suspect they were looking for, but to also link different crimes together in a way they weren't previously able to using only traditional investigative techniques. But there was a problem blocking that last part from coming to fruition. Back in the early 1980s, law enforcement agencies were more or less working in isolation from one another. They all had their own specific procedures or paperwork and local files, and there
Oh,
usually
dang.
weren't protocols in place to share that
They're not even
information
working
amongst
together?
themselves.
Come on now.
This caused something called linkage blindness. If a serial offender committed a crime with striking signature characteristics and then went over to another county and did the same crime with the same signatures, those two cases wouldn't get linked together because the departments investigating them would be working in isolation. Even if they did share information, the documentation would be different and a lot of commonalities wouldn't be noticed because of that. This is what VICAP was intended to solve. In 1983, Los Angeles homicide detective Pierce Brooks would testify before Congress to advocate a radical new idea: a computerized database to track unsolved crimes that could be accessed by any law enforcement agency in the country. This database would be set up in such a way that the seemingly minute details of different crimes could be linked together, helping investigators make connections they wouldn't have previously been able to make. Brooks' idea was received enthusiastically, with the FBI fully picking up and funding the project. The database will be built and stored at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia in 1985. And while it may have started out with the thousands of different law enforcement agencies around the country having to mail in handwritten forms that would be digitized by hand in Quantico, the procedures would advance over time as the world became more connected, first through fax machines, and then through an interesting new technology called the internet. In the 2000s, the FBI would launch VICAP Web, a fully internet-based version of the database that could be instantly accessed and browsed by law enforcement agencies. While VICAP Web was and is only able to be accessed by verified law enforcement users, the FBI would also create a much more limited but publicly accessible version of the database, which you can browse through a website hosted by the FBI. When we talk about things that are
This is
scary
the
on this
creepy
channel,
stuff.
there's usually two categories.
So he's about to show a bunch of images of like recreations of what they think the people look like from the FBI database. So these are like based off descriptions. Like, it's going to be some uncanny valley stuff. This is the creepy stuff right here.
Fictional horror tends to be very dramatic and solely relies on artistic elements like aesthetics and storytelling to create fear. It's by design calculated in its delivery. Real-life horror, on the other hand, is never calculated. It's not art designed to strike fear in you, yet it always does a much better job of that than fiction. The FBI's VICAP site is a perfect example of that second category. It's just a cold list of unsolved crimes presented in a manner only meant to convey information in an efficient way and nothing more, but it still manages to be one of the most disturbing sites I've ever seen.
Oh my God.
Here you'll find the Richmond Jane Doe, as well as many other unidentified deceased people. The visual depictions of these individuals range from actual photos, to digital recreations, to physical recreations, to drawings, to even just articles of clothing in cases where the body is in some...
Bro, I feel like you could at least try to, like, there's artists who can draw people who look like people. Why do these digital recreations have to look so uncanny, so weird? Why do they just look off? I feel like I don't understand why they can't just make it look right, like an actual person, even if it's not perfectly accurate. I feel like that's gonna give you more of a sense of like, okay, I seen this person. They kind of look like this photo of a person, rather than I see like this super creepy recreation of a person. It's like, oh, I recognize that. Nobody's gonna be like, oh, I recognize that. Like, what?
Such bad shape that clothes are the only remaining identifying traits. This entry is particularly unsettling. The only lead investigators have in this case is a single shoe. The remains were in such bad shape that even the victim's sex couldn't be determined. Like the vast majority of cases here, this one remains unsolved. I find it interesting how VICAP sits beside the FBI's top 10 most wanted lists on their website, as these two pages feel like yin and yang. The top 10 most wanted are a list of perpetrators of crime they're actively trying to catch. Or in other words, stories they're trying to put resolutions to. VICAP is a list of victims of crime they're trying to identify. Or rather, resolutions they're trying to put stories to. The two sites feel like binary opposites. Another thing you'll notice on VICAP is how unsettling a lot of these photos look, even completely separated from their chilling contexts. These reconstructions often fall into the uncanny valley, with the people they're depicting looking almost real but not quite, leaving any viewer
that guy doesn't even look almost real.
These depictions look not unlike something you would see in some online horror.
Oh my God. What even is going on there? And who's this guy? Why all the darkness around? Like, this is just so creepy. This is so creepy. They just have this on their website, on their public website.
Project. But not everything creepy looking here is a reconstruction. On June 3rd, 1991, truck driver Eduardo Collin pulled into a Super 8 motel off of I-40 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He rented a room for 2 people for just one night. But the following morning, Eduardo never came to check out. After waiting an entire day, the motel eventually sent a security guard to check on Eduardo's room on June 5th. It had been locked from the inside, and the guard had to essentially break in using a screwdriver. When he finally got in, there was no one to be found in the main part of the room, just scattered bottles of alcohol. The bathroom was a different story though. In there, the security guard found a woman suspended in the air, hanging from a suitcase strap tied to the shower. She was dead. Investigators would determine her cause of death to be hanging, which was found to be self-inflicted, and had occurred on June 3rd, the night the room was rented. Even though she had only been deceased for 2 days, the shower had been running the entire time, and the extreme amount of moisture combined with the sweltering New Mexico heat greatly advanced the decay process, and her body was already in a state of putrefaction when she was found. She had heroin in her system, and judging by the fact police found a scale in the room, drugs may have played a part in this tragedy. Many questions hung in the air about this case, the most immediate of which being Eduardo's whereabouts. He was nowhere to be found. The license plate he had given to the hotel staff had been fraudulent. The front desk employee who had been working the night of June 3rd was able to give a physical description of Eduardo, which happened to fit a picture found in his room.
Oh, that's where the creepy... Oh my god!
This is a photo of the deceased woman while she was still alive.
Oh my god.
It appears to have been taken at one of those mall photo booths, and the police assumed that the other man in the photo was...
Why does she look like that? What the hell? Yo, maybe it's just overexposed or something like that. That gave me chills. That gave me goosebumps. It gave me literal goosebumps. Oh my god. What the hell? And why is bro so happy?
Eduardo.
That's the killer.
No one had seen this woman while she was still alive. She had no identifying marks on her body, and she didn't have any sort of ID on her. The only record of her ever having been alive in the first place was this eerie photo of her and this mystery man. Years would go by without any progress in this case. The effort would mainly be focused around finding Eduardo. Eventually, the police would manage to track down his immediate family, who let investigators know that Eduardo had passed away from natural causes while they were looking for him. When police asked family members if they had recognized the woman in this photo with Eduardo, they only reacted with confusion. The man in the picture was not Eduardo.
Yo, what? Wait, why did they think it's Eduardo in the first place? Oh my god. Imagine somebody like thinking that you're the killer, but you have no connection to the crime. That's like one of my worst fears is like being, maybe frame's not the right word because that's like intention, but like to being falsely accused. Who is this guy then? If it's not Eduardo.
Again, no progress would be made for an enormous amount of time, until 2021 when investigators actually managed to somehow track down the man.
I keep hearing noises and I'm getting scared. To be honest, this video is scaring the crap out of me.
This photo. While his identity has never been released publicly, the police are not considering him a suspect in any possible crime. He also wasn't able to fully identify the woman, only telling police that she had come to Albuquerque from Los Angeles, that he only knew her as Becca. The initial and most common theory regarding this mystery is that Becca may have been a lady of the night. Also found in the room were 5 $100 bills, an oddly large denomination of money to be carrying around with you, especially in 1991. It would explain why she was with a truck driver at a motel and why she didn't have any ID. The police have also supposedly recovered more pictures of Becca while she was alive, but haven't released them publicly because of their supposedly explicit nature. Whether Becca was an escort or not ultimately doesn't matter. Investigators assumed she was, and her case likely didn't get the attention it needed because of that. If Eduardo had been located before his own death years later, this case would have been solved more than 20 years ago. But he wasn't, so it just remains as one of the many eerie entries in VICAP. If you're interested in helping on this case, I really recommend checking out the Becca Doe subreddit, which was set up with the specific purpose of investigating this case. And you can also check out the Grateful Doe subreddit, which is intended for all unidentified people cases. Believe it or not, internet sleuths are not just good for finding lost media. Grateful Doe has actually directly linked a couple unidentified people to missing persons cases, and I'm sure they would appreciate your help.
That's one thing cool. I find. That's what I'm saying is like pre-internet, you don't have all these people like working together trying to find these cases. Like post-internet, these things are possible. There's like so many people out there who are just smart and who have the willingness to like look through all the evidence and stuff like that. Because law enforcement doesn't have the time to go through everybody. Like the people on the internet who do this stuff. That's so cool to me. That's so cool.
When the case was open. Nowadays, detailed digital artistic recreations seem to be the standard, And while these sometimes can look uncanny, they really don't compare to the clay reconstructions you'll see in older cases.
Yeah, I'm glad we got rid of these clay recreations.
Nightmare
Like, oh my God. Like, I feel like a painting would be better, you know? Like, just make it 2D. Even if I saw a guy who had, like, the same type of hair, type of face, unless he looked this creepy in real life, I'm not putting two and two together.
They're made to resemble the victims as much as possible, but
where'd the eyebrows go?
They all still seem to end up looking somewhere in between life and death. I mentioned the Uncanny Valley earlier. One theory as to the origin of why the Uncanny Valley effect exists in the first place is fear of corpses. Humans may have an instinctual fear of dead bodies to keep us away from diseases.
Yo, this guy right here. Oh my God. I'm seeing this guy in my dreams tonight. This is so creepy. Bro, if I turned around and saw that guy behind me, I hope I explode on the spot.
In my opinion, these unsettling clay models perfectly trigger that instinct. It would also seem, based on whatever on this site, that the worse condition a body is found in, the more uncanny the clay model looks. In May 1992, a farmer in Boone County, Indiana, was working his fields just like any other day. As he worked his way to the edge of his property near the main road, he noticed something laying in the long reeds in the distance. He had a bad feeling and decided to not approach whatever was in front of him, and instead went back home to contact the police. When law enforcement came, they walked down from the road into the reeds, and there, they found the decayed body of a young woman. She wasn't wearing any clothes other than a tank top, and didn't have any noticeable wounds on her body that could point to an immediate cause of death. Her face was so badly decomposed that she was completely unrecognizable. The only distinguishable characteristics on her body were two tattoos, one that said, "Mom," and another that said, "Love." Investigators guessed that she was likely between the ages of 17 and 24, but other than that, there was no way to identify this woman, and she would be entered into the system as just one more Jane Doe.
Oh my God. Bro, imagine being a farmer and just some weird shit happens on your farm. Like, you find a dead body on your farm, you're just trying to go grow corn. I feel like being a farmer would actually be kind of scary at some points. Like, you got a house alone in this big wide open field, and a lot of people feel like they can just walk on private property and everything like that, and then you just wake up and find a dead body in the middle of your field. Like, that's not where you were expecting for your yield that year. That's like outside of the scope of your job.
Without anything to go on, police would start combing through missing persons files in the local area to see if they could find any leads, but none were found. They started investigating nearby truck stops. Maybe this was another case that began with a trucker picking up an escort. After questioning
they just assume it's the truckers every time.
Passing through these truck stops, though, no leads were found. After a few weeks of investigation, the case was considered to be cold, and the woman would be given a pauper's grave next to the police station, with an eerie tombstone only reading, "Unidentified female." A year later, police would reach out to a professor at Michigan State University who had been making advancements in facial reconstructions. They exhumed the victim's body, which at this point was nothing more than a skeleton. Nevertheless, the professor did his best to recreate what Jane Doe may have looked like before her untimely death.
Ooh. The noise got me. I'm sorry. The noise got me.
This was by far the
I got
most
headphones in. The noise got me. I'm sorry. I'm being way too jumpy.
They didn't have much information to go on with the extremely poor condition of her head when they found her body, and they were just doing the best they could in what was at the time a still primitive field of forensic science, but I can't help but feeling a little unnerved every time I see this photo.
Oh my God.
The police would place this model in their lobby to see if anybody who passed through it may have any information, but nobody ever did. In 2018, they would use more modernized techniques to make a couple much less unsettling looking facial reconstructions.
That's not bad.
But these still didn't lead to any new developments.
That's not bad. See, now this is what I'm talking about.
County Jane Doe.
I feel like this isn't even modern technology. You could have just drawn something like that back then. You just didn't need, don't use the clay. Just don't use the clay to make the facial reconstructions. Just draw it out.
Was just one in an endless line of unidentified corpses found in the USA who would never get their story told.
Yeah, nobody's
but in
remembering.
2020, that would change. You see, when they exhumed her body in 1993, police had luckily made sure to extract some of Jane Doe's DNA. And 27 years later, they sent it to a forensic genealogy firm for examination. and just over 1 year later, a match was found. In 1992, the Shinagovsky family in Toledo, Ohio were dismayed when their youngest daughter Maggie had seemingly vanished into thin air. While alarmed, they weren't entirely panicked. Margaret was about to turn 18, and all 7 of her older siblings had left home in a similarly swift manner around the same age. So why wouldn't she do the same? As time went on, they heard nothing from her though. The Shinagovskys' concern grew. They found that she had taken nothing from her room, which was messy and didn't look like how someone would leave their space before moving out. Maybe she hadn't just left.
They didn't even get the hair color right.
Maybe something happened to her. Her siblings would drive around looking for her, but would come up empty-handed.
The 3D recreation looks nothing like her. They weren't doing anything back then. The models that they had for these people were not helping. They're waste of time. Total waste of time. There's no way you're going to notice this person from that previous 3D recreation. There's no way.
It's unclear whether they filed a missing persons report or not, but for the next 28 years, Maggie's family had no idea if she was off living her life somewhere or if something horrible had happened to her. But in 2020, their worst fears were realized. Margaret had met an untimely end, likely before her family even began looking for her. As tragic as this situation is, it is nice to see such stale cold cases still getting attention and even being solved almost 30 years later. Although you can't really say this one is fully solved. Police are treating Maggie's case as a homicide, and they're still looking for information that could lead them to whoever committed this horrible crime. Not every case gets solved because of cutting-edge forensic techniques. Sometimes they get solved because of ICAP. You might be wondering why the FBI decided to make a public version of this program. Well, that's because public interest has been a key part in getting these cases solved, and VICAP is a great way to publicize these mysteries. Our next case, though, believe it or not, was solved in no small part because of Reddit. It's June 26, 1996. Along US Route 58 in rural Virginia, the cars unrelentingly rocket by, each one passing through this liminal space without ever giving it a second thought. A highway is never a destination, it's only a means to get to one. For the occupants of a certain Volkswagen bus, however, this normally transient area would be where their stories would meet an abrupt end. The Greensville County Police were called out to a tree line outside the expressway, where they found a van which had crashed head-on into the trees after seemingly veering off the road. Inside it were 2 young men. They were not wearing their seatbelts. The high-speed collision had taken their lives. The driver was quickly identified as 21-year-old Michael Hager from South Carolina, and police believe the crash likely occurred because he had fallen asleep while driving, as there were no drugs or alcohol in his system. The other man in the car, though, was not carrying any ID, and on top of that, his face had been severely disfigured in the crash, making visual identification next to impossible. Police contacted Hager's family to tell them the bad news, and to also ask if Michael had been traveling with a friend. They said he wasn't, and they also didn't recognize his passenger. A theory developed that this man may have been a hitchhiker that Hager had picked up somewhere along his journey, possibly because of a shared interest. The mystery man had been wearing a tie-dyed shirt when investigators found him, and they also found 2 ticket stubs for a Grateful Dead concert that had occurred 2 nights prior. Hager had not attended the concert, but he was a Grateful Dead fan. It's possible the reason he stopped to pick up a random hitchhiker was because they were both Deadheads, members of a counterculture movement revolving around the Grateful Dead. Also found on the man's body was a handwritten note. It read,
"To Jason, sorry we had to go. See you around. Call me. Carolyn O. and Carolyn T."
At the end of the note was a phone number that was unfortunately incomplete, making it impossible for investigators to follow up on. But it did give them one important clue. This man's name might be Jason. Unfortunately, this was the extent of the leads police had to work with at the time, and the case almost immediately went cold. Yet another eerie claim.
If you have a name, that I feel like that's a lot. Just look for any Jason that goes missing in the area. Like, how many Jasons are going missing in that area? Is that not enough to figure out who this guy is?
Mock-up would be made along with the police sketch, and investigators would ask for the public's help in identifying who this man may be.
Both of those pictures look totally different.
17 years. In 2012, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children will make a better and more modern reconstruction of Jason's likeness.
It's modern, but does it look more similar? Because the modern ones from that other girl, the Tchaikovskys or what, Margaret, I think her name was, did not look similar. Even though they're modern, like they look more like a person, but they didn't look closer to the actual person.
And the public would once again be asked for help. A subreddit would be created called Grateful Doe, which I already mentioned, Internet sleuths here would tirelessly search social media looking for matches. Eventually in 2015, some photos greatly resembling the reconstruction would be found.
Oh, there we go.
They were posted
Okay,
by the
that
former
actually
roommate
did
of the
look
man in
like-
these pictures, who said his name was Jason. Unfortunately, the roommate couldn't remember his last name, but this was still an extremely promising lead. The roommate goes
So
on to describe
promising.
Jason as a laid-back teenager who was into surfing and the Grateful Dead. He had a lot of close friends, but sometime in 1995, he would just vanish without a trace. Mainstream news would start reporting on the story, and Jason's mock-ups and pictures would be shared far and wide on pretty much every social media site. And soon enough, a breakthrough would be made. Jason's last name was Callahan, and when he had turned 18 in 1995, he decided to leave his hometown of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to explore the country on his own. Eventually, he stopped contacting his mother, who had assumed that he had just started a life somewhere. He had come from a broken family, and it's not that unusual for children of divorce to estrange themselves from their parents. Unfortunately, though, this wasn't the case for Jason Callahan, as his life was put to an end before it could really even begin.
That's so
Like
sad.
we talked about earlier, the Grateful Doe subreddit would be used after Jason's case
That's
was
so
solved to
sad.
help out with other cases of unidentified bodies. One of them being our final case for today. In October 1995, in the sleepy town of Brewster in New York State, the body of a middle-aged man would be found in the woods outside an abandoned schoolhouse. The police would be called out to investigate and quickly found evidence that this man had put an end to his life by his own hand. He had no identification on his body, but despite this, his face was still in perfect condition. You'll notice that this is the first case we've talked about today where the victim's face hasn't been disfigured in some way. This is rare. Usually a big reason why people can't be identified is because nobody knows what they might have looked like before they passed on. Investigators would have a much easier time making an accurate reconstruction in this case. And even more than that, this man has a very recognizable face.
Yeah.
Surely someone would be able to recognize him, right? Well, someone did. 2 days prior to his body being found, a worker at a curtain shop had sold 2 expensive blankets to this man in the nearby town of New Rochelle. He was then seen taking the train to Brewster on the Metro North Railroad.
Man.
Unfortunately though, these witnesses couldn't give any clues to this man's identity, and they were the only ones who ever came forward. Despite an extensive investigation and having a very accurate looking facial reconstruction, this John Doe has never been identified. The police have made numerous
my
public
God.
appeals, the latest being a VICAP alert sent out in 2020, but no accurate leads have been found since the 90s.
That's
the main
so
theory of
sad. They
regarding
know
this case
exactly
is
what
that
it
this man
looks like.
possibly traveled from New York City to a small out-of-the-way place in a less populated area of the region to end his life, and purposely threw away his ID so he would never be identified. New Rochelle is on the way from NYC to Brewster, and the man is also considered to be of Latin American descent, with New York City having the state's most significant population of Hispanic people. The idea of traveling to an out-of-the-way place to put an end to your existence with the intention of never being found is not just terrifying, it's also tragic.
Yeah.
Everything you've ever done, every other life you've ever touched, your entire story gets boiled down and reduced to a physical thing, a corpse without a name. The VICAP site to me is not just the most chilling site the FBI has,
It's just so crazy. Like, you could like live this full life and just nobody will remember. I mean, there might be people who are like thinking about you, but like nobody will know what happened. Like most of your life goes undocumented. Most of your life goes undocumented, and there's so much of your life that if you die, all of that will be lost. All of that information about what you did, what you know, like what happened to you, what you did to others, it'll be gone. It'll be like totally gone. People will forget, move on. Those people who may remember will die and people forget about them. Like, it's just so crazy. You think that you're just on this planet having such an impact, and like you are somebody, you know, a lot of people, and you think that means that you're going to be remembered for a while, and you think that means that you have an impact. But man, it's so much less of an impact than you would think. It's crazy.
probably the most unsettling site I've visited, period. Becoming unidentified is a very certain kind of terror, and I can't imagine the state of mind somebody would be in to purposely choose that as their exit. It goes without saying, but if you happen to recognize any of the 3 still unsolved John and Jane Does we talked about today, please make a post on the Grateful Doe subreddit. They know how to get in touch with investigators. I'll also restate something I said earlier. If you're into solving internet mysteries and looking for lost media, maybe consider joining Grateful Doe and help look for lost people as well. That's it for today, guys. Have a good night.
No, that's enough for today. Oh my God. Guys, Guys, that did not give me a good feeling, to be honest. To start my day, it's morning time. It's morning time. I woke up not too long ago. That did not give me a good feeling.